So I didn't have a whole lot to really video today on the fact that we've been working on the house, uh, and I was going to be doing the same thing you've seen doing yesterday, and yeah, it's going to be pretty much very much a lot of the same things. But I thought today would be a good chance while we was waiting for it to cool off and some clouds to come over before we got back on the roof to do a little short clip on the mess that I got into on my Ford 445C loader. I'm actually down on my knee right now to show you if anyone's ever had any problems along this line. Maybe this will help you on your old loaders or even some newer stuff, because they use this same box. So my loader's got shuttle shift, and basically what that is it's got an electronic shifter and electronic solenoids inside the transmission, and it allows you to go, you put it in gear and you can go forward and backwards in that same gear. So I was having problems, I had problems last hay season, with it kicking out of gear completely into neutral. Wouldn't go forward, wouldn't go backwards. And I fought with it for about a week then, and finally broke down and bought a new box. It's called the transmission shift module. It's a little computer box. It's about that big. Goes on the outside of the transmission. A big harness plugs into it, excuse me, from the shifter, and it goes down to that, and then there's a harness that plugs into it. It goes into the transmission. Well, I changed that box out, and it seemed to fix it at the time. I'd done a lot of rewiring, trying to clean up some wires at that time, and done a lot of looking online, couldn't find much. Well, done me the same way again this year. After it would get to a certain point, the thing would kick out and it would not come back on. It started out, randomly it would come back on, and then it got to where it just wouldn't come back on at all. So I started looking again. I was like, I just spent, if anybody's ever had these boxes go out on them, they're about $350. So I knew it was new, it wasn't but a year old. So I knew there shouldn't have been no trouble with it. But started looking, started digging, and I found a way to test the boxes. And I'm going to show you the box now, and I'll walk you through it. So don't mind all my wired up mess, because this is still just a temporary to make sure it was going to work. So this is the box, and how you test it is, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little pin right there, a little metal pin, because all this is solid, like it's that old like a rubber stuff that it's been coated in. So there's a little pin there, and what you want to do is you want to test that pin to see what the voltage is with a test meter while you got it turned on and in neutral and then in gear. It's supposed to read like 2 to 4, I think, in neutral, and 4 to 7 in gear. Anything other than that, according to the manual, because I was able to actually find a manual online, anything other than that, you're supposed to replace the box. It says if the box is bad, it's damaged, replace the box if it reads anything other than that. Well, mine was reading like 6.5 in neutral and almost 11.5 when it was in gear. I was like, man, this box is new. Why is it doing this? And then I started looking at what the box actually does. So basically what the box does is it's a sort of a dummy proof situation, is what I call it. If the tractor starts to overheat, if the tractor starts to drop oil pressure or anything like that, it automatically kicks it out of gear to let you know, the equipment operator know, because this is an industrial, to let the equipment operator know that, hey, you're something, check your gauges, basically. I mean, it's sort of an alert to check your gauges in a sense. Well, none of my gauges worked. They've never worked since I've done it, other than the cable drive on the RPM gauge. Nothing else has ever worked. So that being said, I was like, well, none of my gauges work. So I started tracing wires, and I found one wire that was showing 12 volts, to the system, which it's supposed to have. It's supposed to into the wiring harness. I'll show you guys if I can show you here. One of the wires coming into the box, which is right there, this little plug here, this little harness, one of the wires coming into that box was showing 12, which is supposed to. So I started looking for male ground, and I already had my gauge cluster pulled out, and because everything's wired in together on this thing. And I started looking, and there was a wire, there was a black wire, which you can't trust the black and red system on these harnesses. But there was a wire that was showing 4 volts. And I was like, where am I getting these 4 volts from, and why am I getting them there? So I started tracing that wire. Lo and behold, that was supposed to be in a ground. It actually went up all the way up to my gauge cluster and wired into the gauge dummy lights ground. It was teed into that ground. Like, I knew it was supposed to be a ground. I didn't know what was going on. So what I done is I cut that wire and sent it straight to a ground. Guess what? Started working. Sent it to a ground. Voltage showed correct. I started up, started moving. I was like, all right. So I had a ground that was actually giving me hot for some reason. I was like, where am I getting power sent through my ground of my gauge lights, considering I didn't even have any gauge lights? And this is the reason I tell you this, is because wiring in these things can cause you a lot of money, because I'm thinking this was what the problem was last year. It just is what it was. I accidentally pulled a wire that made it work for a little while. So what had come to find out, a dummy light bulb housing had got stuck in between the fuel tank underneath here and this metal housing, and had broke that bulb. And because none of the gauges were working right, it was sending signal to that dummy light bulb to light up. Well, from whatever sensor it's showing on. And it's funny because I got them all unhooked. There's nothing hooked up. But whatever reason, it was sending power to it. So it had jumped over, and the bulb had broke, but the housing inside was still there, and it had squished it, and was, whenever that little dummy light would kick on, it would connect it. So that was where my 4 volts was coming in. So what did I do? I got rid of everything that's not related to that transmission directly. I know that's probably not safe, but I keep an eye on this thing, and I know when it's, I know if I've run it a long time, what I need to check. I know what, all that stuff. I know what to look for, and if something goes down, I'm going to be the one to fix it. So it is what it is. But I'm going to put me some mechanical gauges on it, because I wouldn't mind having some temperature gauge. There is a video out there of a guy, and I almost done what he done, but I'm so glad I didn't. So his box went out, or he thinks it went out, and instead of going and buying the box, he found the wires that controlled the solenoids inside the transmission and cut them and sent 12 volts straight to them from the battery on a 3-way toggle switch. Now, that will get you out of a bind. You can work that piece of equipment in a bad situation if that's all you have to do. Load it on a trailer, whatever. But after learning what I've learned about that box, I'd highly recommend not doing that, because I'm going to tell you why. When it's in gear, it's not supposed to have 12 volts to those solenoids. It's only supposed to have the 7 volts, according to the manual. That being said, if you're putting 12 volts to it all the time, seems to me like over a period of use, you're likely to burn that unit up. The actual solenoids, which are inside the transmission, the forward and reverse solenoids. Now again, you can get it in a pinch, get out of it quick, and you're good to go, but I wouldn't keep it like that long term. It is good to know that you can do that, but I wouldn't do it long term, not for that situation. I'd run it through that box. That box is also designed that if an overload does happen, it's designed to kick out. Just exactly what it actually did. It's just it was keeping an overload through the ground. So my situation was I found it, I fixed it. I've run it a little while just to make sure that definitely did fix it. I'm pretty confident that it did. Now I got to go in and wire grounds up properly because it's just hooked to a clip right now. And done, but I want to show you guys that because sometimes we want to jump to the biggest problem that it could possibly be. I mean, I had people telling me, I believe it's the solenoids. You're going to have to tire it into it. I was on the verge of almost tearing the transmission apart. Like, I really was, because it was so aggravating. And come to find out, it was literally just a ground that got hung up under the metal on the housing. I mean, it was something that simple. So it pays to have a test light, but it also pays to have a voltmeter, a true 12 volt or 120 volt meter, and learn a little bit how to use them, guys, because they can save. That one saved me. I paid $30 for the voltmeter. In the past, I used one all the time, but say it was the only time I ever used it. I paid $30 for the voltmeter just for this job. Well, if I'd have done that, it saved me $350 or more. I don't know what they are now. I mean, they could have jumped up. So it is hot out here. So, you know, do your research, but also, you know, have a few tools. That $30 voltmeter, because I bought a little, and you can get a cheaper one. You can get real cheap ones from like Arbor Freight and stuff, but I bought a little better one because I do use them pretty regular. And my other one, I went to the house to get it. It was a cheaper one. I use them all the time at work. I got a nice one there, but I went to the house to get my cheap one. The battery's dead. I put a new battery in it. It still didn't work. The little fuse in it was bad, so I changed fuse out. With something else must have blown because I changed fuse and battery and it still didn't work. So I figured the digital system probably just went shot. So I went and got me a nicer new one for 30 bucks and saved myself a lot of headache afterward by just finding that, you know, hey, this system works on overloading of power. I didn't have a ground. Like, none of the wires were showing what they should have showed for a ground, and I was getting 4 volts coming into the box that I knew shouldn't have been. It didn't make sense as to why it was coming in like it was. Anyway, I just want to let you guys know that. I hope that helps if you've ever came across these old pieces of equipment. Man, mice, I pulled a rat's nest out of behind this gauge cluster. So you got mice out in the fields. I mean, even if you keep them in a barn and all that good stuff, you still are going to have stuff get in them. I've seen squirrels. I've seen, you know, just you name it, get in this stuff. So if your equipment sets for any amount, don't be shocked when you find out that wires and stuff have gone bad, or it can just go bad over time. This machine's a 92, I think, and it can just go bad over time. I hope that helped. I looked for a video on a transmission control module, and I never could find one other than the one guy. And I'm glad I found him because I was about ready to do what he done, and it got me to researching how that system works. So, you know, he was very helpful in giving me a way to get out of a bad situation. If I ever end up on the back side of the field somewhere and that box actually goes out, then, you know, I can fix it for a moment. But there's nothing beats old mechanical stuff. This is the 3600 Ford that I got from my wife, which I use it more than she does. I'd like to find me a 5600 is what I'd like to have, maybe with a cab and some air conditioner. Yeah. Anyway, see you guys on the next one. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you like this video, I'll be doing a whole lot of other tractors, you know, the sawmilling, building house, all that good stuff. But yeah, also keep an eye open. I'm doing a clutch repair on a PTO clutch on the Grasshopper 721D lawnmower. I blew a clutch out of it, the PTO clutch. So I'm going to be doing that. I got it at the house. I just got to do a repair on it. So I'll try to show you that. And yeah, stay tuned. Thanks, guys.